So we can get started. I want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. I know it's late and you have things you could probably be doing. I appreciate you showing up. This is 20 Modern Visual C++ Best Practices. My name is Eric Battaglio. I am a program manager with the Visual C++ team at Microsoft. I sit in Redmond. I work mostly with community, but I have the benefit of sitting next to a bunch of very smart developers. So as I'm working on code, I can go down the hall and talk to Stefan or Herb or any of the other developers on the team and get expert advice very quickly. So I'm very lucky. Does anybody know what this is? So it's Judge Dredd on a T-Rex with an RPG on a shark. And this is a proposed mascot for C++. It's certainly something that's appropriate. Over on Reddit, there was a discussion about what's appropriate. This was the one that popped out. One of the other ones that really cracked me up was a katana, but instead of a handle, it had another blade. So that was interesting. All right, before we begin, this is a 300-level session. If you're an expert, it may not seem 300. It may seem 100, but that's, if it's new, C++ is new to you, then some of this may be 400 level. Parts seem 500 level to me. So, when we get into templates, things like that, which I don't get into a lot, but when I hear Stefan talk and other folks at Microsoft and in the community talk about templates, it gets up here. Some tips do require Visual Studio, mostly around the editor. And then there's a profile type tool that we have, but everything else should be compiler agnostic. This was generated by, together with people in the community. So we went to the forums and said, hey, here's a session. We've promised it's community sourced. And people spoke up with their tips and we voted them up. And I culled and curated the top 20. No developers were hurt in this process. So one thing I've learned after returning back to C++ and writing code and sharing it in public is if there are 80 developers looking at your code, you will get 81 opinions about the right way to do whatever it is you just did. And this includes reading from a file. So literally, that was my first sample, was reading from a file. And at the end of that process, we had a sample program that used threads and memory map files to read. And it was very fast, but it was kind of beyond what I started with. C++ is expressive. There are lots of correct ways to accomplish a single task. Obviously, it's okay. Choose the one that works best for you, given the constraints you're working with and your comfort level. And this is crowdsourced. You are the community, so feel free to share your experiences during this. If you've got questions that are kind of heavy technical questions, you can ask them at that point or at the end. I may not be able to answer it, but I have walked around the room. There's a lot of experience in this room. If it's a general C++ question, I'm sure we can find the answer. So let's get into the practices. One that popped up was write code for other developers. So you want to code for the next developer. Someone pointed out, explain why, not what, when you're commenting. In this example, you're explaining that you're trying to handle HIPAA requirements, not, if the insured age is less than 16, that's not a good comment. Avoid the formatting wars. So I was coding in the 80s, and I remember books about formatting wars, and I was surprised that this was still a thing. But apparently it is. This would have killed me. I learned with Pascal, a variant of Pascal, and this kind of bracing offended my sensibilities, but I've gotten over it, and it seems fine to me. Pick a standard and just go with it. So as I mentioned, I shared code, and I shared with Stefan and some other folks here at Microsoft, and I love this comment. You see what I did with if there? I didn't have a space, and Stefan said, it's not a function. People who don't put a space after if are bad and should feel bad. And he laughed. So it's tongue-in-cheek, but this is, what's funny is this kind of feedback, if people are honest, they'll give it to you. And this is exactly the kind of stuff I was looking for is, hey, if it's something that is distracting to people I go ask for help from, then I need to shift. And it didn't, so I shifted. This is another one that came up. Understand what you've written. Keep code simple. Excessive complexity hides error. Functions should do one thing well. I was talking to a gentleman in the booth today. I'm not kidding. And I was surprised, right? I mean, functions shouldn't be huge. You shouldn't have hundreds of lines. And this guy was working with legacy code. And he said that there was a function in one of the files that had in excess of a couple thousand lines in it. So this is a real. I mean, you still get apparently complex code from developers who may not have been as dubious or, I'm sorry, as careful as you. Don't know why it works? That's a bug. This is something else that the community raised, and I thought that that was kind of interesting based on experience. This particular thing is something I wrote. It's relatively simple. It's doing some bit flipping to get a mask out to find out what's in a program I shared. But the idea that when I was first learning C, I didn't necessarily know the syntax very well. So what I would do is I would try the just one more change, or if I was a cook, I'd just say, oh well, it'll be better with that spice, and it'll taste perfect. Well, that didn't work. Let me grab a different thing and throw it in there. I would just try different syntax until whatever it is worked. What we heard is that's if you don't know why something works, then it is a bug, and you should fix it if you wrote it. Second practice is prefer automatic resource management. This should be, anybody who's used C++ or is looking at C++, this is an obvious thing. Use a stack. So when you create an object, just use stack semantics. If you do that, if something goes wrong, when the code leaves scope, things will be cleaned up automatically for you. You don't have to run a delete. Here's another example of one at class level. Same thing. If something happens, it'll clean up. That really threw me off when I jumped back into C++. So I've been on this team for about 11 months, and I hadn't used C++ in a while. This was just something that was wow. So no naked pointers without ownership. So here, we're using new, and then we use delete. And the challenge is, obviously, if there's intervening code there that throws an exception, then you've just lost memory. So it's naked. It should be censored. This is a better example. So use make shared here if you're going to share it, and then it'll be cleaned up. Smart pointer will take care of that for you. And consider updating old code. There are risks. If you're going to go in and modify code, you might introduce a bug. There are also rewards if you don't know what the code is doing, or it's so horribly broken, or there might be memory leaks things. You're not using the stack-based semantics or smart pointers. Then you have a lot to gain. And if you don't know what the code is doing, this is a perfect opportunity for you to go in and refactor it and figure out what's going on, and then upgrade to C++ 11. I mean, you'll just be much better off. And there's a dinosaur. So these T-Rexes lurk out there. Not only the mascot, but they lurk around. So make sure you don't want to update code if it's too risky, but on the other hand, you'll have to sit down and decide if there's a benefit there. So const, it's usually the right choice. This is what an MVP said. It is usually the right choice. Use with state vals instead of define. So here we've got, for the platypus, we've got a constant Boolean is monotremes. It occurred to me after I had submitted this deck that that's probably not the best example, because a platypus is obviously a monotreme, so it should be true all the time. And then for the example below, it's using a static constant there right where it's used instead of off in a header file somewhere else. And this makes sense. You try to use it where it's close to where it's used. You'll also notice that the function itself is const. So it doesn't change internal state. It just returns, or external state, it returns back. And when a function doesn't modify visible state, so that's another instance where we'll use const. In this particular example, stolen from Herb Sutter, herbsutter.com. There's some links here. He's one of the guys that has been writing about this for quite a while, C++. In this particular example, there's three. Get points is constant because it returns points that are fixed. Get number of points, again, size is known. That's constant. You can't change that externally. And then get area. Even though you're caching internally, it doesn't visibly change the state of the object. So that's okay. It should be marked const. Note that this code, I'll give you the link here in a second, this code, it's got concurrency. I mean, Herb goes beyond this and talks about mutable and how you can update this code to be a reentrant. And use const when it counts, not when it doesn't. So here's a great example. In your declaration, you've got an f function there that takes an integer. If you actually put const there, the compiler doesn't really care. It'll ignore it. And it doesn't really do you any good there. But in the definition, even though you're passing by value, I'm looking down here, even though you're passing by value, it does indicate that you cannot change it in the function. So it's good for you to go ahead and put something like that in there, so if you inadvertently go out and try to assign back to that, the compiler will complain and not compile for you. So really it is about what are your intentions and make sure you're expressing the intentions. And Herb Sutter. So this is not the first time he will be referenced. Use range 4. It's all about intentions. So 95% of the time, choice is easy. You'll intend to modify the elements, and you'll use the first example. Or you intend to observe the elements, and you'll use the constant auto ref e example. 95% of the time. So to verify this, I went and asked developers at Microsoft, some folks, we have a pretty big alias of C++ developers at Microsoft in excess of 1,500. And when I followed up with some of them, this is in fact what they do. They just go right out and do this. There are cases, though, that those 5% cases where they need to do something else. And there are cases where you intend to copy, like the first example, that will take a copy. And there are cases where you intend to convert. And then there are also cases where proxies might be involved. An example of that is when you have a vector booleans. You cannot get a reference directly to a bit, so a proxy is involved. And that's the case where you can use auto and then the example below. So 95% of the time. It's a good bet. Don't help the compiler. This is something else that was surprising to me. Compact source code doesn't equal compact executable. Some of us were conditioned to think that this was the case. Anybody recognize what this is, and then for bonus, what it does? Shout out to Apple IIGS people. This is a two-liner that loads a super high-res image to the screen. And because of the way GS and the tokenizer worked, I know that there were cases where you actually had to shove things on there and conserve space to try to get as many tokens on a line as you could. Those are old school days. Like Leggings and Loverboy, this went out with the 80s. So again, if you could read a whole file, back when I was learning C, there was an example of someone reading a whole file in one line. It doesn't really get you anything other than annoying. When the next person comes along to maintain the code, they don't like you. Pointers can hinder optimization. So the first example, I went ahead. All right, let's see. I'll just show you both of them. The first one is fast because pointer is used, right? So they assume that things would be fast there, but in actuality, it's confusing the optimizer. The second example, that's more deliberate, is actually much better. And this is more of a canonical example, but our optimizer guy, one of our optimizer guys, Jim Hogg, has a bunch of articles out there and blog posts about how the vectorizer works, and he's spinning up some new ones. So if you're interested, definitely take a look in that. And by the way, the first one isn't fast because the optimizer doesn't know what the pointers are pointing to, right? They might in fact be pointing to the same thing or something else entirely. Profile later and optimize after that. This is something that I had read a while back, and I went and looked at Code Complete back in the day, McConnell, and it does talk about that you want to profile when you're almost substantially done with your program, and then you can look for hotspots and just focus on those hotspots. I think Donald Knuth once said that the bane of developers is optimizing too soon. So profile and optimize later. Visual Studio has some great profile tools. I'm sure there are others out there. Know your compiler options. Okay, before I go to the next screen, compiler options. Favorites? Okay. Oh, let's see what's on here. There's a list. This is what popped up. The one that I really like his W4 compiler warning level. It's what James McNellis told me we should be using, and he's been doing C++ for a while. It gives you the most feedback and makes sure that your code is most compliant and walking the straight and narrow. WX is something if you're blue skying, you can turn that on and it treats errors. It treats warnings as errors. If you've got a large legacy code base, you're probably not going to want to do that. It's going to cause problems. And then compile in parallel, Ankit pointed me to that. He's someone who had worked with the build and the linker system. That is one that may not be as well known, but it should compile in parallel. There are 2 links down here for the complete list. Okay. Thanks to James. So Billy O'Neill gave me this one. He's an internal developer, and I had to go look it up. He explained it to me, and then I went out and looked up. It is a container, which means that a lot of the things you can do with any other container, like a vector, you can work on with string. And in his experience, he saw lots of developers that had rewritten and reinvented the wheel out of algorithm because they were unaware of this. It's also a user-defined type. This is something that popped up when I was talking to the MVPs going over this deck. I thought this was an interesting example. Given those 2 functions, a bool and a standard string, what is printed when I call it? Woof, because obviously the string literal is a char star. It is not a stud string. So you can convert that to bool. Char star is convertible to bool, and it calls that, and you get woof. Thought it was an interesting example. They're type safe. Strongly typed enums. They are type safe. So the things that's syncing me here is this pointer. There you go. So here, you can actually state them like this and then scope to them. So I have an agent. I specifically pick Perry. I can also specify the underlying type. So I can say unsigned int if I want and pull up some villains there. Movie that Sir Hugo Drax was the villain for James Bond was? Bingo, nice. You'll have to come up and claim your superhero stickers afterwards. Nice. And everybody knows Doofenshmirtz, so I don't have to. They can be forward declared. So I can forward declare them here. And they're not scoped to the enclosing scope, so you won't have collisions. So they're good stuff. Consider non-member functions. Apply the interface principle. Let's see if I can. For a class, all functions that mention X and are supplied with X are logically part of X. So this means for something like vector, in fact, here, let me go right into it here. So in the first example, we've got class X and a void F, but when you look at, what that really manifests itself out to, where you've got an operator and you've got class X, you can see that those are related, even though the operator overload doesn't necessarily ship with or isn't a member of class X. So they logically go together, and you can have non-member functions, right? They're supporting here. Let me go to the next slide. Oh, forgot about this. Coned lookup. Someone gave me a troll face when I was presenting this and said, interface principles related to function lookup. And what Koenig lookup is when the compiler encounters a type in a function call, what it tries to do is resolve that function call by looking at the type and then the namespace, the structures, the class that type belongs to, and it tries to find the matching function that way. So the interface principle kind of says, look, if Koenig lookup can find it, if it's related that way, then it's okay, right? It's part of the interface principle. Hope I didn't butcher that. And then containers store data. Algorithms perform operations on that data. So when you have a vector, you use standard sort to mess with it. It's not something specifically on vector. You're using the algorithms, the STL algorithm, and there's a lot out there. So take advantage of those instead of reinventing. It's kind of like QSort. So with my C hat on, when I mentioned this back to a couple of folks, they said, yeah, it is kind of similar to QSort. So back in the day, with C, you would have a struct, you'd pass that struct around a bunch of functions, and then when you wanted to sort it or something, you would pass that off to QSort with a pointer to a function that would actually do the compare. And it's kind of like that. Herb Sutter again. Definitely follow up on that link. He's got a lot of great content out there, especially about this. Heard of lambdas? Use them? C-sharp, nice. Anybody recognize this house? Right track, but not quite. It is a fraternity house. Bingo! Wow. There's superhero stickers waiting for you. This is the Revenge of the Nerd, the tri-lamb house, right? Lambda, lambda, lambda. So that's the first thing I thought of when it was like, lambda, really? I was thinking of Revenge of the Nerds. One other fact. I went to Texas A&M University, and when I was researching this photo, it turns out that parts of the carnival scene where they were fundraising was filmed on Kyle Field at Texas A&M back in the mid-'80s. Who knew? It's exciting to us Aggies, gig 'em. Nerds. So use explicit capture. Again, you're stating your intentions, and it'll keep you out of trouble. And really, is it about intentions? A lot of what when you're a developer, clearly state your intentions. If you don't know what your intentions are, make sure you understand what they are and make sure that your code is stating it exactly. If not, you can go off into deep weeds. Avoid circular references. This is usually done when you're doing event callbacks using like C++ CX. There is a way around it. As you can see, you can apply a weak reference. But the other solution is to not use a lambda and just use a typical member function and just specify that as your event handler. And I would almost go that route because, again, my intentions are clear. And then use auto for return values. Auto is controversial, and in fact, it didn't make it as a tip here, but it kind of is hiding in some of the individual best practices. Auto is controversial. Some people will say you should use auto as much as you can. Others say that you should be more judicious in it. I tend to land at, if I can't read the code, if I don't know what's going on because of the auto, then I'm against it. And if I don't understand a code base a whole lot, I'm new to the code base, and I see a bunch of autos deep down, I don't know what the type is. And it just is problematic. So, I'm kind of torn between being specific in what my intentions are to going, oh, I'm using this, and it makes it a lot easier. For Lambda returns, it's generally a good idea from what I can assess and from what the feedback, what people were saying. But again, you'll want to decide. People use regular expressions? Excellent. So this is not a surprising one. It's superior to handwritten code. So regular expression is a language for describing string processing. Everybody understands you can pick up a book. Your code might not be as straightforward. So anytime you can do that, that's great. Are closer to the problem domain. They abstract out complexity. Even intricate regular expressions are easier to understand than the equivalent code. But as someone said, some regular expressions can approach incomprehensibility, which is nice, right? Because as I was learning about this, I had used regular expressions back in C# days, and you go to these libraries of regular expressions, and you go, oh yeah, I get that. I don't know what that's doing. I have no idea what that's doing. And then people say, well, this is broken. It's like email parsing, right? It's inherently broken. Why don't you just send an email and see if it bounces, right? I mean, that's literally what, the last time I looked, it was like, wow, okay. And then XML, obviously, right? And HTML closing tags. It's like a disaster. But it is easier to understand than equivalent code. A lot of this stuff, I talked to Stefan. He's got some great presentations. This is a link to his C++ Now session from 2012 where he talks about regular expressions. The guy knows a lot about regular expressions and STL and a bunch of other things. So I advise, if you're interested, go check it out. Here's some examples for search, match, and replace. The first one, this is plain vanilla kind of stuff. You can see what's printed at the bottom. And these are very plain, nothing too sophisticated here. Namespace trick, any idea of what this might be? So the guy that was, so someone in the community said use a namespace trick, pointed to James McNellis's code out on Codeplex, I believe. So I went down to James's office and said, hey, James, I think I understand what it's doing. Why don't you sit me down and walk me through it? So this is exactly what he said is, full namespace qualifiers are ugly. You can see here, Windows Foundation Collections, IMAP, right? It gets ugly, especially if you're having to do this a lot. What you can do is you can map this into a single namespace in a single place, and then get consistency and symmetry and eliminate repetitiveness. And then you can use a shortcut, right, this namespace trick, through the rest of your code. So you can put it, he recommended something like a precompiled header, right? Or just having a config, a standard include that you would then include, and this shares, there might be some collisions, but you can scope those out. So I thought that was a neat trick. Any surprise with this one? It's the hardest working container in the STL. For a sequence container, there is no reason to use anything else. That's what I was told. And after looking around, there are reasons why you would want to go this route. It is fast, uses contiguous memory, and as our own documentation states, so you don't have to go kind of off community, there's some benchmarks out there as well. You get constant time on inserting and deleting at the back, and linear time in the middle. There are other containers that have different characteristics, but again, in general, you should go with vector, and then later, if you need to profile, go back in and profile and see if there's something else you can do. Anybody use Pogo? In the back. How did it work for you? Nice. The shell. Nice. Yeah. So Pogo, I'm just failing at this. Pogo, what it does is it optimizes your code based on runs of your application. It collects data, real user data, and then goes back out and does a compile and link with, or a link with that data, using that data to optimize either for speed or for size. You can train it, you can tell it what you're interested in doing, and then go out and run it, and then capture that data, and then go back and link, and it'll optimize for you. This is what it looks like. You typically compile, then you'll link and instrument it, you'll train it, and then do the optimization. It's used today to optimize operating systems, browsers, languages, and more, things like SQL Server internally. Works with desktop, store apps on x86 and x64 platforms. And there's a walkthrough. Venkat Asthana wrote that walkthrough, and he's the PM right now. So if you have any feedback on this, questions, make it easier, et cetera. It's kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people don't have experience with it, but if you've got legacy code or larger code bases or any kind of code that you think might be useful, give it a shot. The documentation is reasonably good. Ankit's definitely interested in helping. If you have any challenges, problems, email me or Ankit. Any surprise here? We live in a multi-core world. Synchronization is hard. So we got the advice that learn synchronization, then I went out and learned more about it and tried to get, distill it down to 3 or 4 best tips. And what did I get? Consider a different algorithm, right? Your app isn't slow, it's fine. Just leave it. You don't have to go multi-core, just leave it alone. use some other lang. It's easier if you go to, foo lang, whatever the other language is. It naturally supports it. And then there's a bunch of other ones that came up. You really only need it with UI work. Wherever possible, avoid shared mutable state. Design so you don't need synchronization. In reality, the best way to go out and do this is there are some books, there are some reference sites out there. I know Herb Stoddard has some stuff. So based on your problem domain, what your specific issues are, rather than giving general tips, I would advise you, the concurrency in action is one that came up quite a bit. And then Kenny Kerr has some stuff out on MSDN Magazine, which is free. You can navigate over there on the evolution of synchronization, ... There's some other stuff that wouldn't fit. And then Operating Systems 3rd edition. I'm sure people have gone through computer science. There's certainly some love for that. So someone threw that at me and said that. Exceptions are your friend. Use the strongest guarantee you can. Basic is the weakest. You're guaranteed that if an exception comes, if a member fails on a week with basic, the object is in some valid state, but what's funny is you don't know what valid state. So if it's got like 80 valid states or 3 valid states, you know it's in one of them, but you don't know which one. So for me, that's essentially useless, but you can destroy it. Strong, you have commit and rollback semantics, which is nice. If something fails, then you know that you're back to the state that you were in before the thing failed. And then strongest will always complete successfully. And again, I feel like a curator here. I've talked to a lot of people in community. The place with one of the better descriptions of this is Lessons Learned by David out on boost.org. In fact, boost.org is a great place just to learn all sorts of things. So I would send you there. Use them deliberately. That's a theme, right? Intentional and deliberate. Don't use to control program flow. We don't do that, do we? Distinguish errors from not errors and avoid error codes. What's funny about this is, in the C days, it was pretty easy just to ignore error codes. It's pretty easy to ignore exceptions too. You just have a catch with catch anything and then just ignore it. So again, you have to try to handle them, right? Avoid the error codes. Try to catch exceptions if you can do something about it. Don't catch what you can't handle. I'm going to catch zombie invasion, hordes of zombies. What am I going to do? Drive to California? Bill Murray might be able to help, though. Use assertions. Use their runtime and compile time assertions. Assert for runtime checks. What's interesting about this is this specific is I kind of stole this from someone who recommended, if you're doing DirectX development, anything you pass into like pixel shader and those types of pipelines, you want to make sure that you're fine before you send it in. Otherwise, there might be errors down the line that are very difficult to track down. So this is a good example. There might be others in your specific problem domain that kind of make sense. You can kind of sniff around and find those. And then static assert for compile time checks, including templates. This perfect one, this first one looks for 32-bit code support. If it's different, then it throws. And the bottom one is making sure that in the template, then char T is a pod type. And there is an example of that. I give you an example. I'm pointing down to the screen. Point over here. Appeal to vanity time. I was an English lit major, so I'm going to appeal to your vanity. More assertions and code verifications mean fewer bugs, and you're well trained and experienced if you use them from Microsoft research. So I thought that I'd find evidence from Mythical Man Month and Fred Brooks and blah, blah, blah back in the day about all these types of things. And this is actually relatively recent research that shows that in terms of defects that these types of things mean fewer bugs. So if you want a reason to go out and do it, or if you're already doing it, then you're well trained and experienced, and I salute you. Find something new in Visual Studio. So I know this isn't C++ specific, but these things cropped up. You can use multiple monitors, which you may know about. you can, let's see if I picked the right one there. You can use multiple monitors. You can also get different project views here by popping this open. Right? So you can spawn another window. You can potentially throw this on. If I had another monitor here, I could throw it on a different monitor and have a different view into some of my assets if I'm doing a game, for example, or if there's a sub-project and you want a separate view into that sub-project, you can do that. And then one of the things that actually a lot of developers that I ran into just didn't know about this, that if you're in IntelliSense and it's doing this, and you're really trying to look at the code under there and it's annoying and you can't see it, there's a fix for that. You hit Control, you see it faded out, so you can see what's underneath. Comes back. Oops. And quick launch is something that's really popular. Some of the other developers use Control, comma for navigate to dialog. And then change the theme. When I first joined the team, I asked for feedback out on the blog, and there's some diehards out on the blog that talk about the same. There's some hot points for them, and one of the ones that cropped up was a theme. So there is a way to change the theme. You can change the colors under Tools options. There's also Visual Studio Color Theme Editor. What I don't know, and I will try to find out, is can you set the icons or change the icons and set the colors on those? I had that question in the booth. I don't know the answer to that, and we haven't found a way to do it. So I'll have to find that one. Any other? Are there tips? Someone told me, while I was chatting, Control Scroll changes the size of the editor type. I didn't know that. I had to go out and do it the other way. So I'll add that. And thanks for contributing that. Others? I've got more stickers. And books. So control underscore.
If you like there's definition or something like that, control underscore will take it back to where.
Oh, wow. It's control underscore. I'll have to add that. Thank you. Stay informed. This one was one of the first things that popped up in the forums, that the MVPs and the other people that use C++ a lot say, look, you have to stay informed. You have to know what libraries and tools are available. You don't want to reinvent things. So Codeplex, Boost, Poco, REST SDK, that's something the Casablanca team put out here at Microsoft. Threading, list of C++ template libraries at Wikipedia. There's a database access library. There are a lot of other things out there, just being aware of them and even kind of checking to see what kind of issues are raised, and how they design things. That will make you better. Keep an eye on the standards. It's kind of funny sometimes on the internal discussion list, you'll see people, well, what is this supposed to do? And then there are guys and gals that can literally just cite, well, the standard says in blah, 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 sub 3, this is the case. And, sitting in the back there, hey, as long as it works for me, I don't necessarily need to know that level of granularity. What's interesting about some of the papers, though, is, if they're asking for something like exceptions or static assert, that the proposal actually has some great examples, and if you go out and read it, those examples are often used elsewhere as well. So it's kind of neat to see the motivation about why these things were done, and the paper will cover that. Follow the conversation. Guru of the Week is Herb Sutter. That's his blog. That's one place. There are social media channels, email lists. The list goes on. I imagine this is a social media connected audience. So you're out, at least somewhat aware of, if not inundated by things like Twitter. But there are some folks out there that are, that talk about C++. There are different tags you can use depending upon what people are interested in. But it's interesting what you'll see out there. I occasionally run into things that, I just published a such and such, or I just updated this library. It's things I would not have normally known about had I not had filters against Twitter. Facebook is much the same way. And review code written by others and try something new. This is something again and again that, if you've got formal code reviews within your company, that can be a enlightening experience. I know just for me, sharing code with folks that have been doing this and work on the libraries team and on the compiler team that have been doing this for years and know much more about it than I ever will, having them come in and say, this is a good practice, or I would have done this slightly differently given your stated requirements. That's really helpful, because at the end of the day, I just want to be productive. I'm interested in the language. I'll go out and have an adult beverage with you and talk about some of the standards. But at the end of the day, 5 o'clock comes along, I want my stuff to work, meeting the requirements I have, and I want to go. So this is a great way to pick up tricks and things like that. I've learned a lot that way, and it's really valuable. This is the last one. I'm a community guy. I am a community PM at Microsoft. I've spent my last 6 years doing this, first in the IT Pro community, so I may have met some of you before, and now in the developer community. You should connect with people, right? There's a lot of great information out there. Everybody in the C++ community, the developer community, has been really helpful. No one that I've seen has really, not been willing to engage. So if you have questions about anything C++ related or developer related, there's a good chance you'll find someone who can find that answer for you very quickly. And depending upon where you ask the question, there might be other people that see your question and step in and answer. So for example, if you're on, there's a Visual C++ on Facebook, there's some other user group places out on Facebook that we keep an eye on. And if questions come up and if they're not answered, or maybe it's related to Pogo and someone's having an issue, I can go get, we can try to direct our internal resources to go out and answer those types of questions. So it is very helpful, and you can see what else other people are doing. It's kind of interesting to see that, some people are out doing video editing, and this is a challenge they're having with, some aspect of that. Share advice, experiences, and know-how. It's a great opportunity for you to share all that you know. So if you've been dealing with legacy code, and you've got some best tips, best practices, a lot of people can't come to something like this. You can certainly provide a arguably better, more conversant experience online by sharing those types of experiences, either on a blog, a wiki, or a video, short video, however you choose to do it. It's really helpful. You'd be surprised how many people are lurking out there that read this, right? And once you start to identify, if you give information around a certain area, you'll get this list of followers, right? People will start following you. You may not know they're there, but they definitely follow you. So I would encourage you to do that. Engage with others and always assume good intent. That last part is sometimes very difficult, right? So in your personal lives too, sometimes it's like, why did that person just say that to me? In community, I have found over the last few years that it is easy to assume good intent, because most people, like the audience here, has good intentions. I'm sure, hopefully none of you came to ask me questions that would sink me. That'll not be a challenge. I'd bring someone else in for that. But out in community, people have good intent. So your questions will be answered, your interactions will be generally very positive, but just assume good intent. There's another one. And there's a link to that site at the bottom of this photo. There's a Swiss Army knife out there that's got like 800 blades on it, all different kinds of tools on it, that's also there. And then I think someone once said that, C++ is like a bazooka, because you won't just take your toe off, you'll take your whole leg off. So I thought the bazooka was kind of funny too. So I'm obviously the curator here. I'm not an expert. I know some of this. I've got experience. These are the people that made this happen. And you gave some great tips. I want to thank them. And you. Community does work. Some of these are MVPs. And if you're interested in becoming an MVP or just learning more about getting more information from Microsoft, definitely ping me. We're looking for C++ MVPs. We've got some good ones. We're certainly looking to grow that around some of the development that you guys are probably already doing for mobile devices, and even how you're handling legacy and porting from legacy. So ping me. Are there questions? I feel like can you? Tools for detecting memory leaks? Does a room know of, back in the day we used something like a Pure Integrate. There was a tool out there to check memory leaks. Sir? Debug diagnostics?
Yes.
Debug diagnostics.
Actually, there are a couple of options. You can, if possible for him to look for other platforms. Like there are multiple platforms here targeting. Validate is one of the best options you can look for. The other thing is that there are like debug dialogues and keys in Visual Studio, Visual C++. And runtime which you can use to figure out like how the memory is getting allocated and de-allocated. And then you can understand the real problem lies.
Excellent. I'll have to go back and see if we get more debugging. There's certainly an interest there.
Then you will actually get a list of like what are the memory leaks happening, where it is happening, and actually debug and see.
Excellent. Thanks.
Actually, I won't be saying this is a question, but a remark. I'm a developer for C++ in multiple environments. Not even in Windows, but Linux, HP, IBM, COS. Whatever you're mentioning here is whatever. And in fact, I will love to believe it that I should follow it, but unfortunately I can't. Because the compilers are yet to come to the standards. Even like, I think the compiler that is most compliant to the standard is GCC or G++, then after that is Visual C++. Followed by the HP and IBM is way behind.
Well, the Intel compiler is also
Not the
GCC, Intel.
So
that is a big problem, like probably, I don't know, like others who are referred to this issue, but that is probably a big issue.
cross-platform's an issue.
Cross-platform is a big issue.
Yeah. So this is something that I've talked to quite a few developers about, and cross-platform, both within Microsoft and externally, cross-platform is a challenge because, external libraries don't always compile for all the platforms that you're targeting, even if you're using kind of a minimal subset of C++. And there is a kind of a disconnect between compiler and what's supported. And then even beyond that, some of the build environments and the project organization and how that is handled, and then versioning and if you've got a common set of code, sharing that across all the kind of platforms that use it, that there are huge challenges there. So I've learned about the challenges to the extent that I would look to, if you're looking for certain features that might help, I would urge folks to tune in to the build talks that I think they're going to publish those. It's around the 26th of June, so that's when we have promised to give you more information about Visual Studio 2013. I obviously cannot speak to that, but that at the build timeframe at the end of the month, they'll certainly have more information about it. Herb Sutter will be giving a talk, or should be talking. He did last year, so there's a good chance he'll be doing it again this year, and that's where I would look for information. I think we might have that. Yeah, I think MSDN has one. I think the VC blog even might have one. So there is a list like that. If you search, I believe MSDN has it on compliance against C++ 11.
Do you have anything with the compliance case suite, which I can just run?
If there is, I'm unaware of it. I'm unaware of one. I'm not much help, am I? I don't know if there may be a set of there may be things out in the community that you can run against a compiler, but there is a checklist. I have seen the checklist about which compilers support what in conformance, and I'm pretty sure that we've been pretty open about that as well. Yeah, STL. That's yeah, STL. Are there other questions? Well, I appreciate you coming. I think I spoke a little fast against the speaker coach's advice. I went in and spoke a little fast, but I appreciate you coming. And those of you who got stickers, please come up and collect them. And I've got 3 copies of C++ AMP, Accelerated Multiprocessing, Massive Parallelism, written by Kate Gregory, who's an MVP, and A.D. Miller, who works at Microsoft and did the physics n-body problem in here. So if you're interested in this, please come up. And then I do have these superhero stickers.